Welcome to episode 1, Frame. In this episode we'll be going from getting your picture onto Lightroom, adding basic camera corrections, straightening the image, cropping it to what you're going to use, ready for the rest of the tutorials. Now, these tutorials are going to be based using Lightroom Classic and then Photoshop on PC, but a lot of these methods will work on other things such as Lightroom CC free on your mobile, and other image editing software such as Capture One. Quickly, first we'll do a brief foray into the RAW versus JPEG battle. Now, when you're taking a picture, especially on a DSLR or mirrorless camera, you'll be able to take a photo either in RAW mode or in JPEG, or sometimes both. RAW will give you all the data that your camera has picked up for that particular photograph. This enables you to modify it more later. You can pull the highlights down. There will be more info there than if you save it as a JPEG. The benefit of a JPEG is that the camera already does some editing for you. This means that you'll end up with a better initial image before editing, but you won't have quite as much flexibility later on. My advice, if you're not an experienced photographer and you have the option to take both, take both. This means that you've got the raw image that gives you all the flexibility, and you've also got a JPEG that you can compare it to try and get to at least the level that the JPEG is, and then you can play around and pull some of the highlights down, as I was saying, lift some of the shadows or play with the colours, and it gives you just that bit more range to be able to make adjustments without distorting or destroying the image. So that distinction is done in camera, so you'll need to do that before taking any photographs. I appreciate it's difficult to take new images at the moment, so if you've only got JPEGs, that's fine. You'll still be able to do these tutorials perfectly okay. You just might not be able to push the sliders quite as much as if you were using RAW. So that's a preview. Let's get onto the PC. So here we are at the PC. We're going to jump straight in. So you can see we've got two images here that I've already imported into Lightroom, and these are the raw files. So we've got the one on the left, and that's shot with my old Nikon camera, and then on the right we've got a long exposure of the beacon, and that's on Aberystwyth South Beach. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the very first things you should change when an image comes into Lightroom. So we're going to start by looking at the left hand side image of the promenade, go up to the develop module up on the top right, and this brings up all your adjustments on the right hand side. I'm just going to hide the presets on the left. So first thing we want to do is come down to lens corrections. So we're going to remove chromatic aberration, and what this does, if we have a quick look in the image, really zoomed in, you can see these red and green lines. Click remove chromatic aberration, it gets rid of a majority of those straight away. The next thing to do is to enable profile corrections. Now this picks up the make and model of whatever camera you've used and makes some automatic corrections based on what Lightroom knows about this camera. So normally that will be the vignette, so the dark areas in the corners and around the edges of the image, but also some of the barrel distortions, so some of the warping around the edges of the image that is common, especially when using really wide angle lenses. So this is shot at 10mm on a crop frame, so that's about a 17mm if you're using a full frame camera. So click that, and as you can see, especially clear in this bottom right hand corner, gets lighter to match the colour of the rest of the image, and it stops this curve that you see right at the edge. The next thing we're going to do is remove the sharpening that Lightroom automatically applies to an image. So to do that, we're going into the detail tab here, and then we're going to pull this amount of sharpening all the way down. And what that does, if we zoom right in on this image, is if we remove the sharpening, it does make it look blurrier, but we're going to add in our own sharpening later. The reason we're going to do that instead of using this sharpening method is very simple. If I go to the far extreme, you can see all these lines where it's trying to sharpen the entire image, as well as the edges, which is what you really want sharpening to do. So even at the lower levels, it's still doing that in these areas, in the whites. So if we remove that completely, although the edges will look slightly blurrier at this stage, it means we'll get a better final image. So that one's done, come out, and those are your very basic starting point corrections. The next thing we're going to do is some straightening. So I'm going to come out and go into the long exposure image, go into the develop module. And what I'm going to do to start with quickly is go into my basic and brighten up the whole image, just so we can see it a little bit easier, because this has been shot 1 or 2 stops underexposed. So one of the most annoying things that you see from photographs is when the horizon line isn't straight. Now you can see this in images where the sea isn't in the photograph, but especially in images such as these where you've got the sea and it's a really clean line. It's a massive indicator that the image hasn't received the proper attention. So we're going to go into cropping, and there are 3 ways of doing this. The first way, very simple, is to press the auto button. That normally gives a fairly good indicator and has changed by 0.27 and straightened up the image. Sometimes though, auto doesn't work very well. It might not be able to pick up the horizon line because there are various interruptions to it. There might not be a clean horizon line for it to use in other cases, which we'll have a look in a second. So the next way, the very manual way, so what we're going to do is reset that. Pump up the brightness again. And then we're just going to very simply, manually do the crop. So if we crop in a little bit, and then we can look at these guiding lines that appear when you click just outside of the crop square and line them up with the horizon line. Now, if I would say be there and it's in the middle, you can just move it slightly so that it appears either perfectly on or sometimes nicely with a little gap underneath. So then you can move it slightly and then you've got a little gap underneath that you can check that it's the same all the way across. And then once you've done that, you can then go to resize the image to however big you wanted. The third and final way of doing this, if we turn the exposure up again, is to use the straighten tool. Now this is a tool that a lot of people miss because it's not overly obvious that it's a tool. It looks like it's just a symbol. So if you click on this tool, you get a different cursor. All you've got to do, click and make sure that the dot is as perfectly on the line as you possibly can do, especially when using the horizon of the sea. Click and hold and it gives you this. So if you then go click as far as you can away from that original line and drop, it then uses what you've done as a perfectly straight line and straightens up the image. So in some images, there won't obviously be the sea as a horizon line. So you've either got to rely on auto and hope that that can do a good job, or go for your best judgment using any of the other 2 separate techniques. Now, especially when shooting very wide, you might end up with the problem that I've got in this image, which is very clearly the houses on the left-hand side are sloping inwards. This is because of a slight fisheye effect on the lens, so it means that everything is going to fall in to the image because of the distortion. The easiest way to do this is with the transform tool. So we're going to go to transform on the bottom right, and there are again different methods of doing this. Quickest way, auto. Let's see what that gives us. Not very good, because Lightroom thinks that the horizon line is as we showed earlier. You can see, although it's straightened up this area somewhat, it's completely skewed the image. So we'll undo that and go on to possibly the most reliable one, which is guided. So guided gives you 4 lines you can place anywhere on the image. These you want to place on bits of the image that you know are straight, either perfectly vertical or perfectly horizontal. So for this image, I'm going to choose this section over here. Using the magnifier, we're going to go from this line there, across to there, straighten that bit up. Then going to look on the right hand side of the image and click on the straight bit of the house on the corner of the building, pull it down to there, and then just in those 2, you straighten up the right hand side, but you can see the left hand side isn't vertically straight, so you want to make sure you've got a vertical on the left hand side if you can. This can be quite fiddly. From the top down to the bottom. Now what you can see is, although the right hand side and the left hand side of the image are now a lot straighter, we've lost both the bottom corners. So the way around this is to press Constrain Crop, go back up to the crop section, and then move down to be inside the area where you still have an image. So you do lose a lot of this around the top and the right, but once you go in, compared to the original image, you can see how that's a lot better. The final thing we're going to look at is cropping for social media. So we've got this image which we straightened earlier, which won't fit on Instagram, for example, because it is too tall. So to do that, you come over to the top where it says original in your crop and straighten section. You can either do 1x1, which gives you the normal Instagram square, or 4x5, which gives you the slightly taller crop, which gives you more real estate in Instagram and is supposed to correlate to slightly more likes. So if you press that, and then you can rearrange, choose a smaller section if you only want that, pick your composition, press enter, and then you're ready to start doing some basic editing. So that was episode 1, frame. Although not the most complicated or exciting of things, it puts us in a really good place for episode 2, develop. This will be looking at things like the highlights, the shadows, clarity, texture, as well as starting to use adjustment layers, which are hugely powerful and really important to making your images look great. So that video is out next Wednesday. If you want to like or comment on this video in the meantime, subscribe to the channel if you've not, and then I'll see you there for episode 2, develop. There are so many bees. It's like 4 bees. I don't like bees. It rained yesterday. It's so damp. Hey, this isn't green screen. Look, everyone keeps saying this is green screen. This is real. It's not green screen. I'm actually outside.